But let me just start by saying this, okay? Plenty of time for the controversy from the game. And the controversy is a part of the beauty of the game and what we got out of the Holy War. Because I would tell you that that game and just everything surrounding it is like everything that college football should be. Remember, like, people, I think, always like will be a little quizzical when I use this example, but I've definitely done it before here on the channel. It's been a minute. But when I tell you guys, like, hey, don't, forget about anybody who's only viewing college football through the prism of the playoff and everything else doesn't matter, because that's not what's beautiful about the sport. That's not what's great about the sport. It's the rivalries, the idiosyncrasies, all of that stuff that happens in college football that is what makes it great. And I always use the example of the Egg Bowl. I'm like, dude, there's nothing better than, now they've taken it away from us on Thanksgiving night, but traditionally there's nothing better than Thanksgiving night going and watching 5-6 Mississippi State and 6-5 Mississippi, 6-5 Ole Miss, with a receiver peeing in the end zone and getting flagged 15 yards, and watching those bitter rivalries go at it where former quarterbacks are like threatening to kill people in the stands. I mean, all the stuff that's happened recently in that rivalry, like, that's what's great. Now, this has a different tone and tenor to it, but it's just as bitter. And everything that happened to this, to me, is like everything that's great about college football, man. I mean, the rivalry in and of itself, before we even get to the game, let's talk about like table stakes for the rivalry here. Table stakes, it is about more than just, hey, that's the other team, we don't like those guys. Like, there are clear cultural undertones here between BYU and Utah. That definitely adds to the bitterness. And I'm not even saying that's maybe a great thing, as we become a more divided society, like, borders on, all right, is this going to be a great thing? But it's clearly there for the rivalry, and I do think that enhances it. And now you even have like some new undertones about the conference that both teams are in. Like, Utah clearly resents being in this league. I mean, we just saw how the athletic director acted and what he said about the Big 12. Utah resents being in this league. They don't want to be here. They think they are better than this. They think they are above it, even though they lost 5 straight and they are damn near last place in the conference. They can thank Mike Gundy for keeping them out of the cellar. Meanwhile, BYU is stoked to be here and flourishing. So you've got that as another undertone to this before the game is even kicked off. I learned in all of this rivalry, always a great thing in a rivalry is when you disagree on how many times the game has actually been played. I love that. That is very table stakes for a great rivalry sort of thing. We can't agree on whether it was someone forfeiting games. I know in this case, it's like, if you count the earliest games that's great. That makes the rivalry better. Now let's talk about the setup of this game, right? The setup of the game that we got out of Utah and BYU. One team is trying to ruin another's dream season. Okay, you've got BYU rolling through, in essence, a dream season here, unbeaten. Utah is the team that, maybe not according to Vegas, but a lot of people just looking at records would say they should be a huge underdog, and BYU's got to go play them. You got a chance to ruin your rival season when it's been a bitterly disappointing year for you as a program. That setup is great. And you're doing it at a home environment that, look, Utah fans, here's respect. Rice Eccles, incredible home environment. One of the best in college football, when it's full and it's rocking. And this definitely, say what you will about Utah's season, it turned this game into the Super Bowl of the season. This was the one thing left that Utah could really salvage from this season that would mean anything to the fan base, because clearly they expect so much more than what is actually out there on the table to be accomplished by this team this year. This was it. You can spoil Utah or a BYU season. You spoil the rival season. This was it. So all of that enhances this. And then let's talk about the game itself. The game itself, frankly, probably close to script that what a lot of people would have guesstimated this would wind up being. I think most people thought BYU was going to get a really stiff test from Utah in this game. They did. You get a really close game. You get a last-second finish. If you really wanted the ultimate in like the game, how the actual game flow was, you probably would have wanted just a better played game, a little more exciting game until the end. But that's not really what we expected out of these two teams, or at least I didn't. So you got a great finish that kept everybody enthralled until the very end. And then it ends in controversy, right? You get some controversy at the end of the game. yelling and screaming immediately after the game. I saw a video of Utah AD Mark Harlan. Like they flagged the Utah sideline, right? He's like yelling at as the kickoff is happening, like the last play of the game is happening. Like Mark Harlan is like yelling on the sideline. And then after the game, you can see him in the scrum with the camera looking at the coaches, like Harlan's out there yelling, Kyle Whittingham's yelling. You've got people upset, screaming after the game, and AD interrupts the post-game press conference to step up to the podium and obviously say what he said about the Big 12. Like it doesn't get much better than that when we're talking about a rivalry game. So I did want to just level set everybody on like what we got out of that. Please appreciate that, because it's hard to deliver much more than that. I have seen a lot of BYU fans saying like, hey, this is kind of par for the course. There's been better. All right, like maybe so, and I welcome it if there is. But with all the extracurricular that happened and the extra setup of BYU being this like team of destiny this year and having to go conquer their rival on the road who's beaten them 9 of the last 10 times, that really was a lot, man. That was great. It was great theater. It was great TV. All of it, I think, really delivered. If you want to nitpick one thing about this, might just be that it was so late. I was on the West Coast. I had a buddy's wedding in San Diego yesterday. So I was on the West Coast for it. And even I was like, damn, I'm like looking at it, I'm like, man, we're getting like past midnight on the West Coast here. This is pretty late. So that sucks and probably cuts down a bit on how many people could see it. But this was significant enough that I think you really had a lot of the college football world watching. And does it work out well for the Big 12? Yes, it does, because you delivered a great game, a fantastic finish, and it was a significant, like meaningful game because you do have an unbeaten team playing in it. So people want to tune in this playoff world, misguided as some people may be, caring only about the playoff in college football. That is what a lot of people really care about. So they're tuning in to see, all right, what the hell's going to happen to BYU here? People now talk about it. You got so much extended shelf life on this game because of what has happened with the fallout, starting with Mark Harlan yelling after the game, then continuing to his grabbing the mic at the podium, then on into the Big 12 issuing a statement, which, by the way, that is a thing. The Big 12 issued a statement and said they're fining him $40K. But the statement, honestly, was probably a little bit more damning than that in terms of Brett Yormark just really throwing his weight around. And then we got a Mark Harlan response. So all of that prolongs the life of this story. And I really think the only loser in all that is Utah and Harlan. I don't think it's really that bad for the Big 12. Brett Yormark promotes this as an entertainment product, right? He comes from the entertainment world, the entertainment background. The Big 12 works a lot with WWE. There were WWE superstars at Big 12 Media Day, right? I don't know enough about the current WWE to tell you who they were, but the league works a lot with them. This is kind of a WWE element to it, right? Like Mark Harlan just cut a promo after the game. That's in essence what happened. That is great when you're trying to produce a very entertaining product here. You can't be the Big Ten of the SEC and do it the standard way. This stuff really helps. I think this is good for the league, man. And by the way, your unbeaten team wins. So the unbeaten team moves on. That obviously is your best bet in the playoff, making some noise. That is your best bet to stave off a charge from Boise to try and potentially take that fourth at-large spot, fourth auto bid, or maybe even third, if we're talking here about the ACC dropping into fourth, like I mentioned Andy Staples had earlier. But that's kind of exactly it, right? The unbeaten team moved on. So in today's day and age, if the unbeaten team moved on, and if this all did work out so well for the Big 12, well, then it must be some kind of conspiracy. It must be some kind of conspiracy, because that, ladies and gentlemen, is kind of how our world works right now. If it doesn't go your way, if it is something you disagree with, then, well, there must be some conspiratorial reason behind it, right? So Utah fans had an obvious moment here to point to with the holding call, but it turns very quickly into, I've got ACC fans in my mentions. Well, the Big 12 just needed to keep Boise down. They needed to give themselves the best chance to hold on to that fourth auto bid spot. So the refs were in on it, you know? The refs were in on it. They wanted to give themselves absolutely no buffer on any of this at all. If something borderline had not happened on that 4th and 10 play, they would have been screwed and nothing would have been, they would have messed it up. The refs would have lost out on their check from Karen at Endeavor, right? Because they gave themselves no buffer and they had to make it happen on that one last play, right? That was Yormark in the ear. Like in Practical Jokers, Yormark was just back in the background giving them the instructions through the mic, and the official was like, oh, okay, got it. I'll hit the hold here. If you really try and spell out what people are like insinuating would happen here, it can be pretty crazy. But that is what people do. And it's not just limited. It's not just limited to, unfortunately, like crazy people on the internet. We get some of our leaders doing that as well. We get some of our leaders doing that, like Mark Harlan, the athletic director at Utah, who seemed to really buy into that with his comments after the game. And man, it's really just unfortunate. I think what he did, it was just a bad look for Utah, first of all. Not a bad look for the Big 12 at all. A bad look for Utah. It really vindicated the way that Big 12 fans have felt about Utah since they entered the league. And it gave you a peek behind the curtain where you say, all right, well, that's where all this is coming from. Look, if their leader, the guy that runs the entire athletic department, is going to act like this, of course the fans are going to act like this too. And I would tell you the other thing that we really learned from Mark Harlan's little tirade was, I think there's some legitimate fear about where Utah football is headed, and everything that has happened in the last 2 years, culminating in this disaster of a season for Utah, is spilling out.